She was just a tired waitress saving a stranger's life in a crowded diner. What she didn't know, the elderly woman gasping for air was a mafia boss's mother. And the moment she refused his money, everything changed. Myra's feet were screaming. She'd been on them for 11 hours straight, and the dinner rush at Sal's diner showed no signs of slowing down. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as she balanced 3 plates on her left arm and grabbed 2 more with her right hand. Table 6 needed ketchup. Table 9 wanted their check 15 minutes ago. The coffee pot was empty again. "Order up," Danny shouted from the kitchen, his voice cutting through the chaos of clinking dishes and conversation. Mira delivered the plates with her trademark smile, the one that earned her decent tips despite the exhaustion etched under her eyes. She was 26, but felt 40 on nights like this. 2 jobs, a teenage brother to raise, and rent that came due whether she was tired or not. "Miss? Miss?" A sharp voice cut through her thoughts. Mira turned to see a well-dressed woman in her 70s at table 12, waving frantically. The woman's face had gone pale, her hand clutching at her chest. Her companion, a younger man in an expensive suit, stood frozen, his phone halfway to his ear. Time slowed. Mira dropped the coffee pot she'd been holding. It shattered on the tile floor, but she was already moving. The other waitress, Paula, gasped. Customers turned to stare. But Mira had tunnel vision, her body operating on instinct, and the CPR training she'd gotten years ago when she worked at a summer camp.
"Ma'am?"
"Ma'am, can you hear me?" Mira reached the table as the woman slumped forward. The man in the suit caught her, lowering her gently to the floor. "She has a heart condition," he said, his voice tight with controlled panic. "I'm calling an ambulance." Mira dropped to her knees beside the woman.
"No pulse. No breathing."
"Does anyone know CPR?" she shouted, but she was already tilting the woman's head back, checking her airway. The diner had gone silent except for the man's urgent voice giving the address to 911. Mira positioned her hands on the woman's chest, interlaced her fingers, and began compressions. Hard and fast, just like she'd been taught. 30 compressions, 2 rescue breaths. Again. Again. "Come on," Mira whispered between compressions. "Stay with me." The woman's designer handbag lay on its side, its contents spilled across the floor. A lipstick. Reading glasses. A leather wallet with a silver clasp. Mira barely noticed. Her arms burned. Sweat dripped down her temple. She counted in her head, maintaining the rhythm. 30 compressions. 2 breaths. "The ambulance is 5 minutes out," the man said, kneeling across from her. His hands were shaking. "She's going to make it," Mira said, though she wasn't sure. She just needed to believe it. Needed him to believe it. 30 compressions. 2 breaths. A minute passed. Then 2. Myra's muscles screamed in protest, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Somewhere in the background, she heard Paula crying. Danny had come out from the kitchen, phone in hand, recording or ready to help. She didn't know which. Then a gasp. The woman's chest heaved on its own. Her eyes fluttered open, confused and frightened. She coughed, drawing in ragged breaths that were the most beautiful sound Mira had ever heard. "You're okay," Mira said softly, keeping her hand on the woman's shoulder. "You're okay. Help is coming." The woman's eyes found Myra's face. Her lips moved, but no words came out. Her hand, trembling and cold, reached up and clasped Myra's wrist with surprising strength. "Don't try to talk," Mira said. "Just breathe. Nice and slow." The wail of sirens grew louder. The man in the suit was talking rapidly, explaining the situation, but his eyes never left the woman on the floor. His mother, Mira realized. The way he looked at her, that was love mixed with terror. The paramedics burst through the door 3 minutes later, equipment in hand, moving with practiced efficiency. Mira stepped back, her legs suddenly weak. Paula caught her arm, steadying her. "You saved her life," Paula whispered, tears streaming down her face. Mira, you saved her life. But Mira wasn't thinking about that. She was watching the paramedics work, watching them load the woman onto a stretcher, watching the man in the suit follow them out to the ambulance. He paused at the door, turned back, and locked eyes with Mira across the crowded diner. "Thank you," he mouthed. Then he was gone. The door swung shut. The ambulance pulled away, sirens fading into the night. And slowly, the diner came back to life. Customers began talking again, though in hushed, awed tones. Danny returned to the kitchen. Paula started cleaning up the broken coffee pot. Mira stood there, hands still shaking, the adrenaline draining from her system and leaving her hollow. "You okay, honey?" Sal himself had emerged from the back office, his weathered face creased with concern.
Yeah,
Mira said.
yeah, I'm fine.
But she wasn't fine. She was thinking about that woman's face, the way her hand had clutched Myra's wrist. She was thinking about the man in the suit and the expensive watch on his wrist that probably cost more than Mira made in a year. She was thinking about how fragile life was, how quickly everything could change. "Take 5, Sal said gently. "Go splash some water on your face." Mira nodded and headed to the bathroom. She locked the door behind her, turned on the faucet, and let the cold water run over her hands. When she looked up at her reflection, she barely recognized herself. Her ponytail had come loose. Her uniform was wrinkled and stained. Her eyes were wide, still processing what had just happened. A life. She'd saved a life. She dried her hands on a paper towel and straightened her shoulders. She still had 4 hours left on her shift, and rent was due in 3 days. There was no time to fall apart. When she emerged from the bathroom, the diner had mostly returned to normal. But as she picked up her order pad and forced her tired feet to move, Mira didn't notice the black sedan that had pulled up across the street. Or the man inside it, watching the diner with cold, calculating eyes. The next morning came too soon. Myra's alarm screamed at 6 a.m., dragging her from a dreamless sleep. Her arms ached from the CPR compressions, a dull throb that reminded her last night had been real. She'd saved someone's life, then finished her shift, gone home, checked on her brother Tyler, and collapsed into bed at 2 a.m. Now it was time to do it all over again. She shuffled into the kitchen of their cramped 2-bedroom apartment, finding Tyler already awake, textbooks spread across the small table. He was 17, a senior in high school, and brilliant in a way that made Myra's heart ache with pride and worry. Brilliant kids needed college, and college needed money they didn't have. "You're up early," she said, starting the coffee maker. Chemistry test, he didn't look up from his notes. "Heard you comin' late. Long shift." Mira, he finally met her eyes, his expression serious beyond his years. Paula called. "She told me what happened." Mira sighed. "Of course she did."
I'm fine, Tingon.
"You saved someone's life," his voice cracked slightly. "That's not nothing." She crossed to him, pressed a kiss to the top of his head. "It was just CPR. Anyone would have done it. But they didn't." "You did." He grabbed her hand, squeezed it. "Mom and Dad would be proud." The words hit her like a physical blow. Their parents had died 4 years ago. A drunk driver, wrong place, wrong time. Mira had been 22, Tyler 13. She'd fought the state to keep him, dropped out of community college, and worked herself to the bone to make sure he had a chance at the life she'd lost. "Get back to studying," she said, her voice rough. "Ace that test." By the time Mira reached Sal's diner at 10 a.m., the morning rush was already underway. But something was different. The moment she pushed through the door, conversation stopped. Heads turned. Paula practically ran across the diner to grab her. "Mira. Oh my God, have you heard?" "Heard what?" Danny emerged from the kitchen, his face pale. Even Sal had come out from his office, which almost never happened during business hours. The air felt heavy, charged with something Mira couldn't identify. "The woman you saved," Paula said, gripping Myra's arm. "Do you know who she is?" "A customer," Mira said slowly. "An older woman with a heart condition." "Margaret Voss," Sal said quietly. Her name is Margaret Voss. The name meant nothing to Mira. She looked around at the faces staring at her, waiting for understanding to dawn. It didn't. Am I supposed to know who that is? Paula's eyes widened. You really don't know? Know what? She's Adrian Voss's mother, Danny said, his voice barely above a whisper. The name Adrian Voss hung in the air like a thundercloud. Mira saw recognition dawn on the faces around her, customers who'd been eavesdropping, the cook in the kitchen window, even old Mr. Chen who came in every day for black coffee and toast. Who's Adrian Voss? Mira asked. Sal pulled her aside, away from curious ears. His expression was grave. Adrian Voss runs half the organized crime on the East Coast. Gambling, protection, loan sharking, you name it. He's not someone you want to be connected to, honey. The words didn't make sense at first. Myra's brain struggled to connect the elegant, frightened woman from last night to the world Sal was describing. The Mafia.
Crime.
Violence. That man with her, Mira said slowly. In the expensive suit. That was probably one of his associates. Paula chimed in, having followed them. Adrian doesn't go anywhere without security. His mother's the only soft spot he has. Everyone knows that. Myra's legs felt weak. She pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. I just
did CPR.
I didn't know. Of course you didn't, Sal said kindly. You did the right thing. You saved a woman's life. But Mira, listen to me carefully. These people, they're not like us. They have their own rules, their own way of doing things. What does that mean? It means they might come back, Danny said from across the room. To thank you. To pay you off. To make sure you don't talk to anyone about what happened. But nothing happened, Mira protested. A woman had a heart attack. I helped her. That's all. Sal exchanged a look with Paula that made Myra's stomach clench. In their world, nothing is ever that simple. The day passed in a blur. Customers whispered and stared. Some asked questions Mira couldn't answer. Others suddenly became very interested in their food, avoiding eye contact. The black sedan across the street that Mira hadn't noticed last night was still there. She noticed it now. During her break, Mira searched Adrian Voss on her phone. The results made her blood run cold. Federal investigations. Suspected connections to multiple murders. A man who'd built an empire on fear and violence. A man whose mother she'd saved. She thought about Margaret Voss's hand clutching her wrist, the gratitude in those fading eyes. She thought about the man in the suit, the way he'd looked at his mother with such desperate love. Monsters didn't love their mothers, did they? But as the sun began to set and Myra's shift drew to a close, the black sedan across the street pulled away. And 3 blocks down, it was replaced by another one. Someone was watching, and Mira had a sinking feeling that her life, as she knew it, was about to change forever. The black cars arrived at exactly 2 p.m. the next day. Mira was refilling salt shakers when she heard the engine's low, expensive purrs that didn't belong in this neighborhood. Through the diner's front window, she watched 3 black SUVs pull up to the curb in perfect formation. Her hands froze mid-pour. Oh God, Paula whispered from behind the counter. He's here. The diner went silent. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Coffee cups paused at lips. Even the jukebox seemed to sense the moment, the current song ending with no one moving to select another. The door opened. He entered alone, but his presence filled the entire space. Adrian Voss was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair graying at the temples and eyes that looked like they'd seen things Mira couldn't imagine. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than 3 months of her rent, and he moved with the quiet confidence of a man who'd never been told no. Every instinct Mira had screamed at her to look away, to pretend she was invisible. But she couldn't. She stood there, salt shaker in hand, as those cold eyes swept the room and landed on her. He didn't smile, didn't threaten. He simply looked at her with an intensity that made her feel transparent. Who saved my mother? His voice was deep, controlled, terrifyingly calm. The silence stretched. Mira felt every eye in the diner turn toward her. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to hide, to run, to be anywhere but here. Instead, she set down the salt shaker with a hand that trembled only slightly. I did. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Adrian Voss crossed the diner in 4 long strides. Up close, she could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights, the tension in his jaw. This was a man who carried violence in his bones, but right now he just looked tired. "What's your name?"
Mira.
"Mira Chun." He studied her face like he was memorizing it. "My mother is alive because of you. I just did what anyone would do." "No," the word was sharp, final. "Most people freeze. Most people wait for someone else to act. You didn't." He reached into his jacket. Mira flinched. She couldn't help it. But he only pulled out an envelope, thick and white. He placed it on the counter between them. $50,000, he said quietly. "It's not enough, but it's a start." The number didn't feel real. Mira stared at the envelope like it might bite her.
$50,000.
She could pay off their debts. Tyler's college. A new apartment. Everything. But she thought about her parents, about the way her father had looked at dirty cops who'd tried to shake him down at his restaurant. She thought about her mother's voice. "We don't owe anyone anything, and no one owns us." "I can't accept that," Mira said softly. The diner erupted in barely suppressed gasps. Adrian Voss's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. "Why not?" "Because I didn't save your mother for money." Mira met his gaze, forcing herself not to look away. "I saved her because she needed help. That's all. Everyone wants something. I want to go back to work." She picked up her salt shaker again, her hands steadier now. "And I want you to know that your mother seemed like a lovely person. I'm glad she's okay." For a long moment, Adrian Voss didn't move. He stood there, this man who commanded fear from everyone he met, looking at a tired waitress in a stained uniform who'd just turned down more money than she'd see in 2 years. Finally, he picked up the envelope and slid it back into his jacket. "You're not afraid of me," he said. It wasn't a question. "I'm terrified of you," Mira admitted honestly. "But I still can't take your money. It wouldn't be right." Something almost like respect crossed his face. He pulled a business card from his pocket, heavy cardstock, embossed lettering, and placed it where the envelope had been. "If you ever need anything at all," he paused. "My mother asked about you. She wants to thank you herself." "That's not necessary." "It is to her." His voice softened slightly. "She's a stubborn woman. Despite everything." Mira almost smiled. "She sounds nice." Adrian Voss nodded once, a sharp movement. Then he turned and walked back toward the door. His hand was on the handle when he paused and looked back. "Miss Chen?" "Yes. You have a brother. Tyler. Senior at Lincoln High." It wasn't a question. He knew. Of course he knew. He's a smart kid. Grades good enough for any college he wants. Myra's blood ran cold. The implied threat, or was it a promise, hung in the air. But Adrian Voss's next words surprised her. "Make sure he stays safe. This neighborhood isn't always kind to good people." He opened the door. "I'll have someone watching the area. No one will bother you or your brother." Then he was gone, climbing into the middle SUV. The vehicles pulled away in the same perfect formation they'd arrived in, leaving only the faint smell of expensive cologne and the business card on the counter. Mira picked it up with shaking hands. No name, no title. Just a phone number in raised black letters. "Girl," Paula breathed, appearing at her elbow. "Do you have any idea what just happened?" Mira stared at the card. "I think I just met the devil." "The devil," Paula corrected, "just offered you protection." And that, Mira realized, might be even more dangerous than his anger. 3 days passed, and Mira couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Not in a threatening way, that was the strange part. She'd catch glimpses of unfamiliar cars on her street, always different ones, always parked with a clear view of her apartment building. When she walked Tyler to school, She'd notice a man in a coffee shop who seemed to be reading the same page of his newspaper for 20 minutes. At the grocery store, a woman in sunglasses browsed the same aisle Mira did, never putting anything in her cart. Protection, Adrian Voss had called it. It felt more like living in a fishbowl. Tyler had noticed too. That guy's been following us for 2 blocks, he muttered one morning as they walked to the bus stop. I know, Mira said quietly. Just ignore him. Ignore him? Mira, what's going on? Paula said some mob boss came to the diner. Is this about that woman you saved? She tried to keep it from him, but of course the neighborhood talked. Everyone at Sal's diner had a cousin who had a friend who knew someone, and within 48 hours, half the block knew that Mira Chun had saved Margaret Voss and lived to tell about it. It's nothing, she lied. He was just grateful. That's all. Then why are we being followed? We're not, she stopped. Tyler was too smart for lies. He's just being cautious, making sure no one gives us trouble because of what happened. Tyler's face went pale. Are we in danger? No, Mira said firmly, pulling him close.
No, baby.
I promise. It's just complicated. But she wasn't sure that was true. At night, she'd lie awake thinking about Adrian Voss's words. Everyone wants something. He'd been so certain, so confused when she'd turned down his money. Like she'd broken some fundamental rule of his world. The business card sat in her nightstand drawer. She'd pick it up sometimes, run her thumb over the embossed numbers, and wonder what would happen if she called. What would she even say? Thank you for the invisible bodyguards, but they're freaking out my teenage brother. On the 4th day, everything changed. Mira was working the lunch shift when Sal called her into his office. His face was serious, uncomfortable in a way that made her stomach drop. Mira, honey, sit down. What's wrong? Did I do something?
No.
Nothing like that, he rubbed his face tiredly. I got a visit this morning. Before you came in. She didn't need to ask from whom. Mr. Voss. One of his people. Very polite, very professional. Sal's laugh was bitter. Told me that if I ever needed anything, permits, inspections, supplier problems, I should call this number. He slid a card across the desk. Same design as Myra's. Different number. I don't understand. He's showing respect, Sal explained. In his world, you saved his mother's life. That creates a debt. And since you won't let him pay you directly, he's going to take care of the people around you whether you like it or not. Myra's hands clenched in her lap. I don't want this. I know. But it's not really about what you want anymore. Sal's eyes were kind but sad. These people, they operate on loyalty and obligation. You did something good, something pure, and now you're tangled up in their world. The best thing you can do is just let it be. Let it be? Sal, I have a brother to think about. I can't have the Mafia deciding they own me. They don't own you. That's not what this is, he leaned forward. Mira, I've lived in this city a long time. I've seen what happens when the Voss family feels disrespected. But I've also seen what happens to people they choose to protect. Nothing bad touches them. Ever. The words should have been comforting. Instead, they felt like a cage closing in. That evening, as Mira walked home through the early autumn dusk, her phone rang. Unknown number. Her thumb hovered over the decline button, but something made her answer. Miss Jen. The voice was female, older, warm with a slight tremor. This is Margaret Voss. Mira stopped dead in the middle of the sidewalk. People flowed around her like water around a stone. Mrs. Voss, how are you feeling? Better, thanks to you. There was genuine emotion in her voice. I've been trying to reach you through my son, but he tells me you're a stubborn young woman. Despite everything, Mira smiled. He's one to talk. Margaret laughed, a sound like wind chimes, light and unexpected. Yes, well, stubbornness runs in our family. Miss Chen, I know you refused Adrian's money. That speaks to your character. But would you refuse an old woman's request to meet you? No obligations, no gifts. Just tea and conversation. I'd very much like to thank you properly. Mira should have said no. Should have drawn a line right there, kept her distance, protected herself and Tyler from this world. But there was something in Margaret's voice, a loneliness, maybe, or a genuine warmth, that made her hesitate. I work double shifts most days, Mira said slowly. What's your next day off? Sunday. Perfect. I'll send a car at 2 o'clock.
You stay there.
I promise, Margaret's voice softened. You gave me more time with my son. The least I can do is give you a proper thank you. The line went dead before Mira could protest. She stood there, phone in hand, watching her shadow stretch long across the pavement. The man who'd been following her at a discreet distance, today's version was in a gray jacket, pretended to check his own phone. Mira thought about her mother's words. We don't owe anyone anything. But maybe, she thought, some debts were worth paying. The car arrived at exactly 2 o'clock on Sunday. Mira had spent the morning arguing with Tyler, who'd insisted that meeting Margaret Voss was a terrible idea. He'd found articles online, old news stories about Adrian Voss, federal investigations, rumors of violence. None of it had ever stuck, but the pattern was clear. This is how it starts, Tyler had said, pacing their small living room. First it's just tea. Then it's favors. Then we're in so deep we can't get out. It's just tea with an old woman, Mira had replied, but even she didn't fully believe it. Now, as she climbed into the Blacktown car, she wondered if Tyler was right. The driver was polite, professional, and completely silent. Classical music played softly through the speakers. The seats were leather, probably worth more than everything in her apartment combined. They drove for 40 minutes, leaving the city behind and winding through neighborhoods that got progressively nicer. Bigger houses, wider lawns, trees that looked like they'd been there for centuries. Finally, they turned through iron gates that opened automatically, following a private drive to a house that took Myra's breath away. It wasn't a mansion, not quite. But it was beautiful in an understated way, all stone and windows with ivy climbing the walls. Gardens surrounded it, still blooming despite the late season. A fountain tinkled somewhere nearby. The driver opened her door. Mrs. Voss is in the conservatory, miss. Through the house and to the left. Myra's sneakers felt wrong on the marble entryway. Everything here was elegant, expensive, carefully chosen. She passed rooms full of antique furniture, walls lined with paintings that might have been originals. But there were personal touches too, framed photographs, a child's drawing hung with pride, fresh flowers in every room. The conservatory was all glass and light, filled with plants and comfortable chairs. And there, in a wingback chair with a blanket across her lap, was Margaret Voss. She looked smaller than Mira remembered, more fragile. But her eyes were sharp and warm when she smiled. Mira, she said, extending a hand.
Come, sit.
You're even lovelier than Adrian described. Mira took her hand, soft skin but a firm grip. Thank you for inviting me, Mrs. Voss. Margaret, please. Mrs. Voss makes me feel ancient. She gestured to the chair across from her. There. A woman Mira hadn't noticed, housekeeper, maybe, poured from a delicate pot. Real china, not mugs. The tea smelled like jasmine and honey. I won't keep you long, Margaret said once they were alone. I know you work hard. Multiple jobs, isn't it? And raising your brother on your own. The research didn't surprise Mira, but it still made her uncomfortable. Tyler's a good kid. It's not as hard as people think.
Nonsense.
It's exactly as hard as people think, probably harder. Margaret's eyes were knowing. I raised Adrian alone after his father died. I know what it cost. Mira sipped her tea, unsure what to say. This woman had saved her life, in a way, given her son whatever humanity he had left. But she'd also raised the most feared man on the East Coast. You're wondering about me, Margaret said gently. About how a woman like me has a son like Adrian. I didn't mean. It's all right. I wonder sometimes too. Margaret gazed out at the garden. His father was in the business. I tried to keep Adrian away from it, sent him to good schools, hoped he'd choose differently. But after his father was killed, Adrian felt he had to step up.
Protect me.
Protect what was ours, she looked back at Mira. He's not a good man by most standards. but he's a good son. He seems to care about you very much, Mira said carefully.
He does.
And that's why your kindness matters so much. You didn't know who I was. You didn't calculate odds or weigh consequences. You just helped. Margaret's eyes glistened. That kind of goodness is rare in our world. I'm not special, Margaret. I just did what needed to be done. That's exactly what makes you special. Margaret set down her cup. Adrian tells me you refused his money, that you won't accept any help. I can't be bought. No one's trying to buy you, dear. Margaret's smile was sad. But you need to understand something about my son. He spent his entire life in a world where everything is a transaction. Loyalty is purchased. Protection is earned through fear. And then you, she shook her head wonderingly. You save his mother's life and ask for nothing. You broke his entire worldview. Mira thought about Adrian Voss's face in the diner, the confusion in his eyes. I just want to be left alone. Tyler and me, living our lives. I know. But you've made an impression, whether you meant to or not. Margaret reached across and squeezed Myra's hand. I wanted to meet you, so I could tell you this, you're safe. Both of you. Adrian won't let anything happen to you, not because he owns you, but because you showed kindness to his mother. That means something in his world. And what happens when he decides I owe him something? He won't. Margaret's voice was firm. I won't let him. This isn't about debt or obligation. It's about, she paused, searching for words. It's about remembering that good people exist. That not everything is for sale. They talked for another hour. About gardening, about Tyler's college applications, about Myra's parents and the restaurant they'd run. It was easy, comfortable in a way Mira hadn't expected. Margaret was funny, sharp, genuinely interested in Myra's life. But as the car drove her home through the fading afternoon light, Mira couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. She'd been brought into something bigger than tea and conversation. And somewhere in the city, in an office with bulletproof windows, Adrian Voss listened to his head of security's report and made a decision that would change everything. Sir, we've detected unusual activity. Someone's been asking questions about the girl. About what happened at the diner. Adrian's expression didn't change, but his hand tightened on his glass of whiskey.
Who?
We're still determining that. But they're being careful. Professional. Find out who. And make sure they don't get close to her, he paused. Or her brother. Yes, sir. Because kindness, Adrian Voss was learning, came with a price. And he was the one who'd have to pay it. Margaret called again 3 days later. Mira, dear, I hope I'm not bothering you. I was wondering, do you like theater? I have tickets to a matinee on Thursday, and my usual companion canceled. Mira should have said no. Should have kept her distance. But she'd thought about their conversation constantly, about Margaret's kindness and the loneliness that had flickered in her eyes when she'd talked about Adrian's world. I have to work until 3, Mira said. The show's at 7. Perfect timing. Please say yes. An old woman gets so tired of her own company. That's how it started. Thursday became dinner the following week, a small Italian place Margaret loved, family-owned, where everyone knew her name but no one mentioned her son. Then it was Sunday brunch, Margaret insisting Mira bring Tyler, who'd been suspicious until Margaret had asked about his chemistry project and actually listened to his 20-minute explanation of molecular bonds. She's not what I expected, Tyler admitted on the walk home, carrying leftovers Margaret had insisted he take. She's actually normal. But nothing about this was normal, and Mira knew it. She saw the security, always present but never intrusive. The way restaurant owners refused to let Margaret pay, their smiles tight with fear. The careful distance other patrons kept, like Margaret existed in a bubble no one dared to pop. Still, the friendship grew. Margaret started calling when she needed help with her garden. Her heart wasn't strong enough for heavy work anymore. Mira would come over on her days off, spending hours weeding flower beds and pruning roses while Margaret sat in a chair directing her with gentle suggestions. A little more to the left, dear. Yes, perfect. They'd talk about everything. Margaret told stories about Adrian as a child, how he brought home stray cats, how he'd gotten in fights defending smaller kids, how he'd cried when his goldfish died. Stories that made him seem human, vulnerable, nothing like the man Mira had met at the diner. Mira told Margaret about her parents, about the night the police had come to her door, about holding Tyler while he sobbed and making a promise to keep him safe no matter what. "You're a remarkable young woman," Margaret said one afternoon, watching Mira plant bulbs for spring. "Your parents would be so proud. I'm just trying not to screw up too badly. That's all any of us can do." Margaret was quiet for a moment. "Adrian asks about you, you know." Myra's hands stilled in the dirt.
Why?
"He's curious. You're the first person in 20 years who's told him no and lived to." Margaret caught herself.
I'm sorry.
That was tasteless. "It's okay." Mira sat back on her heels. "I know what he is, Margaret. I'm not naive. I know you're not. But you see past it to the boy he was. The one who's still in there somewhere." Margaret's voice was wistful. "I sometimes wonder if that boy is gone forever." "He saved me in a way," Mira said quietly. "Those men watching us. Tyler doesn't get bothered walking home anymore." Mrs. Rodriguez down the hall, her landlord was threatening to evict her. Suddenly the building got sold, and the new owner gave everyone new leases at the same rent. She looked at Margaret. "That's Adrian, isn't it?" Margaret didn't deny it. "He takes care of people I care about. It's how he shows love. By fixing their problems before they ask. By making sure they're safe." Margaret reached over and touched Myra's dirt-stained hand. "He doesn't know how to do it any other way." Over the next weeks, Mira fell into a routine. Work, home, Tyler, and 3 or 4 visits a week to Margaret. They'd read together. Margaret loved old novels. They'd watch black and white movies. Sometimes they'd just sit in comfortable silence, Mira doing homework for the online classes she'd secretly started taking again, Margaret knitting blankets she donated to hospitals. It felt like having a grandmother, like having family. Tyler noticed the change in Mira. "You smile more," he said one evening, "when you come back from Margaret's. She's good company. She's the Mafia Don's mother, Mira. She's a lonely old woman who likes flowers and bad puns." Mira pulled him into a hug. "And she asks about you constantly. Your grades, your college applications, whether you're eating enough vegetables." That's weird. That's sweet. But the reality of Margaret's world came crashing back one evening in late October. Mira arrived for dinner to find Margaret pale and shaken, Adrian pacing the conservatory like a caged animal. He stopped when he saw Mira, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be here today, Adrian," Margaret said sharply. "Don't be rude." "Mother, this isn't." He bit off the words, running a hand through his hair. For the first time, Mira saw past the controlled exterior to the stress underneath. "There's been a situation. It's not safe right now." "What kind of situation?" Mira asked. "The kind you don't need to know about." His voice was hard, protective. "Roberto will drive you home." "Adrian, boss, I invited Mira to dinner, and we're having dinner," Margaret said with surprising steel. "Whatever business you have can wait." Father and son, no, mother and son, stared at each other. A battle of wills Mira had seen before, in her own home with Tyler. Despite everything, despite the expensive house and the security and the violence that surrounded this family, they were just a mother and son who loved each other. Adrian broke first. He always did. Mira was learning where his mother was concerned.
Fine.
But security stays close. He looked at Mira, something almost like apology in his eyes. "I'm sorry you got pulled into this." "Into what?" "Into being someone my mother cares about," he said quietly. "That's not always safe." Then he left, and Mira watched him go, wondering what danger she couldn't see. And in a warehouse across the city, men with guns were asking questions about a waitress who'd gotten too close to the Voss family. The man appeared at Sal's diner on a Tuesday morning. He looked ordinary, mid-40s, brown jacket, ordering coffee and eggs. But something about him set off alarms in Myra's head. The way his eyes tracked her movements. The way he smiled when she brought his order, too friendly, too calculating. "You're Mira-chan, right?" he asked as she refilled his coffee. Every instinct screamed danger. Do I know you? Not yet. But I know you. He stirred sugar into his coffee slowly. You're the girl who saved Margaret Voss. Myra's hand tightened on the coffee pot. Across the diner, she caught Danny's eye. He'd noticed something was wrong. I helped a customer who had a medical emergency, she said carefully. That's all. That's all, he repeated amused. You're modest. I like that. Tell me, how's your friendship with Mrs. Voss going? Must be nice spending time in that beautiful house, meeting interesting people. I need to get back to work. His hand shot out, gripping her wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop her. I'm just making conversation. No need to be rude. Let go of her. Danny had appeared, spatula in hand like a weapon. He was 23 and rail-thin, but his voice didn't waver. The man released Myra's wrist, hands up in mock surrender. Easy, friend. Just talking, he stood, threw a 20 on the table. Thanks for the coffee, Myra. I'm sure we'll see each other again. He left. Myra's hands were shaking so hard, she nearly dropped the coffee pot. You okay? Danny asked. I need to call someone. She pulled the business card from her pocket, the one Adrian had given her weeks ago, the one she'd sworn she'd never use. Her fingers trembled as she dialed. He answered on the first ring. Miss Jen. Someone just approached me at the diner, asking about your mother. About me. A pause. Then, describe him. She did every detail she could remember. She heard Adrian speaking to someone else, rapid-fire instructions she couldn't make out. Are you still at work? Yes. Stay inside. Don't leave the building. Someone will be there in 10 minutes. Adrian, what's happening? His voice was ice. Someone's interested in my mother's connection to you. That makes you a target, he paused. I should have seen this coming.
I'm sorry.
The line went dead. The next 10 minutes crawled by. Mira served customers on autopilot, her mind racing. Danny stayed close, watching the door. Paula had called Sal, who'd emerged from his office, looking grim. We're closing early today, Sal announced to the confused customers. Family emergency. The black SUV arrived exactly when Adrian had promised. But it wasn't one of his security team who entered. It was Adrian himself, followed by two men in dark suits who immediately positioned themselves by the windows. Miss Chun, his voice was professional, but his eyes were concerned. We need to talk. Privately. Sal led them to his office. Adrian waited until the door closed before speaking. The Castellano family, their rivals, have been trying to move into my territory for years. They learned about you through their own surveillance. He pulled out his phone, showed her a photo. Is this the man? It was him. The same cold smile. Yes. Adrian's jaw tightened. His name is Frank Moretti. He's Castellano's information gatherer. If he approached you directly, they're planning something. Planning what? But even as she asked, Mira knew. Her stomach turned to ice. They think you're leverage, Adrian said quietly. A way to get to my mother. To get to me. But I'm nobody. You saved my mother's life. You visit her multiple times a week. She talks about you constantly, something almost like pain crossed his face. In their eyes, that makes you family. And family can be used. The room spun. Mira gripped the edge of Sal's desk. Tyler. Oh God, Tyler. Your brother is safe. I had him picked up from school 15 minutes ago. He's at my mother's house with 4 security guards. You took my brother? Myra's voice rose. You had no right. I had every right. Adrian's control cracked. These people don't play games, Miss Chen. They don't send warnings. If Moretti knows about you, he knows about Tyler. And if I hadn't moved first, your brother would already be gone. The words hit like physical blows. Myra's knees went weak. Sal caught her arm, eased her into a chair. This is my fault, she whispered. I should have stayed away. I should have. This is not your fault. Adrian crouched in front of her, forcing her to meet his eyes. You were kind to an old woman. That's all. The fact that men like Castellano exist, that they prey on kindness, that's on us. On our world. Not on you. What do I do? Adrian stood, his expression hardening into something dangerous. You let me handle this. You and Tyler stay somewhere safe until this is resolved. Resolved how? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. No, Mira stood up.
No.
I don't want anyone hurt because of me. There has to be another way. There isn't. His voice was final. I've lived in this world my entire life, Miss Chen. I know how it works. The Castellanos made a move. Now I respond. That's the only language they understand. Then I'll talk to them. I'll tell them I'm nothing to your family. They won't believe you. And even if they did, it's too late. They've already made you a piece on the board. Adrian moved toward the door. Roberta will take you to the house. Stay with my mother. Stay with Tyler. And let me do what I do. Which is what? He looked back at her, and for the first time, Mira saw the man everyone feared. Whatever it takes to keep you safe. Margaret's house felt like a prison, even though the bars were invisible. Tyler was furious. He'd been pulled out of school by strangers, driven to a mansion, and told he couldn't leave. Now he paced the conservatory like a trapped animal while Mira tried to explain. They're trying to protect us, she said for the third time. By kidnapping us? By making us prisoners. Tyler's voice cracked with anger and fear. This is insane, Mira. This whole thing is insane. I told you getting involved with these people was a mistake.
I didn't get involved.
I saved a woman's life. And now we're caught in a mob war. He stopped pacing, his eyes red. What happens to us? What happens when they decide we're too much trouble? Margaret appeared in the doorway, leaning on her cane. Tyler, dear, no one is going to hurt you. You have my word. With all due respect, Mrs. Voss, your word doesn't mean much when people are trying to use us as bait. Margaret flinched, but she didn't argue. Instead, she crossed to Tyler and took his hand. You're right. This is my world's fault. My son's fault. My fault for being someone that made you a target. Her voice was thick with emotion. I'm so sorry. Tyler's anger deflated. He was 17, trying to be tough, but he was still a kid who'd lost his parents and now faced dangers he didn't understand. I just want my sister safe. So do I, Margaret said softly. So does Adrian. That's why he's doing what he's doing. Which is what, exactly? Mira asked. No one had told her anything since they'd arrived 3 hours ago. Margaret hesitated. Adrian is negotiating. Negotiating, the word felt wrong. What does that mean in his world? Before Margaret could answer, the sound of cars on gravel drew their attention. Through the window, Mira watched 4 SUVs pull up. Men emerged, Adrian's security team, tense and alert. And then Adrian himself, still in his suit but with his tie loosened, looking exhausted. He entered through the side door, spotting them immediately. Mother. Miss Chen. Tyler, he nodded to each in turn. We need to talk. They gathered in Margaret's sitting room. Mira and Tyler on the sofa, Margaret in her chair, Adrian standing by the fireplace like he couldn't bear to sit still. The Castellanos want a meeting, he said without preamble. They claim they're not planning anything against you. They say Moretti was acting independently, trying to impress his bosses. Do you believe them? Mira asked. No, Adrian's voice was flat. But they're offering to pull back completely if I agree to certain territorial concessions. So give them what they want, Tyler said. If it keeps us safe. Adrian's laugh was bitter. It doesn't work that way. If I give in to this demand, I look weak. Every other family will try the same tactic. They'll find people I care about and threaten them until I give away everything I've built. Then, what's the alternative? Myra's voice was quiet. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken violence. No, Margaret said firmly. Adrian, no. There has to be another way. There isn't. Adrian met his mother's eyes. They made a move against someone under my protection. If I don't respond, I might as well retire tomorrow. So this is about pride? Mira stood up, her fear transforming into anger. About your reputation? About proving you're still dangerous? This is about survival. Adrian shot back. Mine, yours, Everyone who depends on me. You think if I back down, the Castellanos stop? They'll see weakness and push harder. Next time it won't be threats, it'll be bullets. Then let me go. The words came out before Mira fully thought them through. I'll leave the city, take Tyler, and disappear. Then I'm not your problem anymore. You think that solves anything? Adrian moved toward her, his intensity almost frightening. You think they'll just forget about you? You're connected to my mother now. That doesn't go away because you run. So, what's your solution? Start a war? I'm trying to avoid one. His control finally snapped. You have no idea what I've been doing for the past 6 hours. The calls I've made, the deals I've negotiated, trying to find a way out of this that doesn't end in blood. But every option leads back to the same problem. I can't protect you and maintain my position. Not both. The room went silent. Even Tyler had stopped fidgeting, sensing the weight of the moment. Unless, Adrian said quietly, his eyes on his mother, I make a different choice. Adrian, Margaret whispered. What are you thinking? He turned to face them all, and Mira saw something in his expression she'd never seen before, uncertainty, vulnerability, maybe even fear. What if I walked away, he said. Not from you, Mother, but from the business, from the territories, the operations, all of it. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. Tyler's eyes went wide. Mira couldn't breathe. That's insane, one of Adrian's security men said from the doorway. Mira hadn't even noticed him there. Sir, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious, Roberto. Adrian's voice was steady now, like he'd made a decision, and the weight of uncertainty had lifted. I've been looking for a way out for years. Maybe this is it. They'll never let you go, Roberto insisted. The other family's your own people. Then I'll make it worth their while. Adrian looked at Mira. You asked what I do next. I'm going to do something I should have done years ago. I'm going to choose something other than this life. For us. Myra's voice broke. You'd give up everything for people you barely know? For my mother, Adrian corrected gently. Because she cares about you.
And because he paused.
Because you reminded me that there's another way to live. That kindness exists. That not everything has to be taken by force. Margaret was crying silently. Tyler looked stunned. And Mira felt the full weight of what was happening. A man was willing to dismantle his empire because she'd saved his mother's life. How? She whispered. Adrian smiled, the first real smile she'd ever seen from him. Very carefully. The next 2 weeks were the strangest of Myra's life. She and Tyler stayed at Margaret's house, not as prisoners, but as guests while Adrian orchestrated what he called the transition. Mira watched from the sidelines as a criminal empire was methodically taken apart, piece by piece. It started with meetings. Men in expensive suits arrived at odd hours, sitting with Adrian in his study for conversations Mira wasn't privy to. But she'd see them leave, some angry, some confused, all wary. Adrian was calling in favors, making deals, transferring operations to other families in exchange for guarantees of safety. He's giving them what they've wanted for years, Roberto explained one evening. He'd become an unlikely ally, checking on Mira and Tyler daily. Territory in the port, control of certain gambling operations, connections in the unions. Things people have tried to take by force, he's just handing over. Why are they accepting it? Mira asked. Because Adrian's smart. He's not leaving a power vacuum. He's choosing his successors. And he's making sure anyone who tries to hurt you or Margaret after he's out will face a unified response from families that normally hate each other.
It was brilliant and terrifying.
Adrian was using his power to make himself powerless in a way that protected everyone he cared about. But not everyone was happy. Mira overheard one argument through the study door. A man's voice angry. You built this. Your father died for this. And you're throwing it away for what? A waitress and your mother's feelings? Adrian's response was cold. I'm throwing it away because I choose to. Because I'm tired. Because I want one chance to live without looking over my shoulder. They'll see it as weakness. Let them. I'm making sure that weakness doesn't hurt anyone else. Tyler struggled with it all. He'd spend hours in Margaret's library, trying to process the insanity they'd been pulled into. One night, he found Mira in the conservatory, staring out at the garden. Is he really doing this because of you? Tyler asked quietly. Because of us. Because of your sister's kindness. Margaret had appeared behind them, wrapped in a shawl. But also because he's been looking for an excuse to leave for years. Mira just gave him a reason that makes sense in his world. Protecting family. But we're not his family, Tyler protested. Aren't we? Margaret's smile was sad. Family isn't always blood, dear. Sometimes it's the people who show up, who care, who save your life in a diner without asking for anything in return. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday. Adrian called them all into his study. Mira, Tyler, Margaret, and Roberto. He looked exhausted but relieved, like a man who'd been carrying a boulder and finally set it down. It's done, he said simply. The Castellanos have agreed to the terms. They get 3 of my territories, and in exchange, they've guaranteed that neither Mira nor Tyler will be touched. Ever. By anyone. How can you trust them? Mira asked. Because I made the deal too expensive to break. I've transferred ownership of the port operations to a neutral party, someone both families respect. If anything happens to you, that neutral party has instructions to burn the whole thing down. No one gets it. He leaned against his desk. It's mutually assured destruction. Not elegant, but effective. What about the rest of your business? Margaret asked. Parceled out to 5 different families. Some I sold legally through front companies. Some I just walked away from. By next week, I'll have no operations left except a few legitimate businesses I'm keeping. The room was silent, everyone processing what this meant. What will you do? Mira finally asked. Adrian looked at his mother. I've always wanted to travel. See the places you used to tell me about when I was a kid. Maybe learn to do something normal. Something that doesn't involve violence or fear. You'll be bored in a week, Roberto said, but his voice was fond. Probably, Adrian almost smiled. But I'll be alive. And more importantly, so will the people I care about. Tyler spoke up, his voice uncertain. What about us? Can we go home? You can do whatever you want, Adrian said. The protection extends regardless of where you live or what you do. But he hesitated. My mother has grown very fond of both of you. If you're willing, I'd like you to stay in our lives. No obligations, no debt. Just family. Mira looked at Margaret, who was crying again. Happy tears this time. She thought about the past weeks, the fear and chaos, but also the warmth. The way Margaret had taught Tyler to play chess. The dinners where they'd laughed until their sides hurt. The unexpected belonging. I need to get back to work, Mira said slowly. And Tyler needs to finish school. But she met Adrian's eyes. Sunday dinners? Holidays? That kind of family? That kind of family, Adrian agreed, his voice rough with emotion. Margaret crossed the room and pulled Mira into a fierce hug. My girl, she whispered. My brave, kind girl. 3 days later, Mira and Tyler returned to their apartment. It felt smaller than she remembered, shabbier. But it was home. The watchers were gone, no more black sedans, no more men with newspapers. Just normal life returning, like waking from a dream. Except for the envelope that arrived the next day. Inside was a letter from Adrian, written in surprisingly neat handwriting. Miss Chun, I've set up a trust for Tyler's education. Not a gift, a thank you. You gave my mother more time. You gave me a reason to change. That deserves more than I can ever repay. But since you won't accept money, I'm giving it to someone who needs it more. Tyler is brilliant. He deserves every opportunity. The trust is anonymous. Tell him it's a scholarship if that makes it easier to accept. Thank you for reminding me what it means to be human. Mira held the letter, tears streaming down her face. In trying to stay free, she'd somehow helped free someone else. 3 months passed in quiet normalcy. Mira returned to her shifts at Sal's diner. Tyler finished his college applications, 7 schools. all with full scholarships he believed were merit-based. They had Sunday dinners at Margaret's house, where Adrian was slowly learning to cook and failing spectacularly, much to everyone's amusement. "I can negotiate with the most dangerous men in America," he'd said, staring at a burnt lasagna, "but Italian food defeats me." It almost felt like they'd escaped. Like the nightmare had been just that, a bad dream they'd all woken from. Then Frank Moretti walked into the diner again. It was a Wednesday morning, slow and quiet. Mira was wiping down tables when the door chimed. She looked up and froze. Same brown jacket. Same calculating smile. But something was different in his eyes. Anger, maybe, or resentment. "Hello again, Mira." Her hand moved instinctively toward her phone in her apron pocket, but Moretti raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. "Relax. I'm just here for coffee." "That's still allowed, isn't it?" Danny was in the back. Paula hadn't arrived yet. Mira was effectively alone with a man who'd threatened her family 3 months ago. "What do you want?" Her voice was steadier than she felt. "I want to congratulate you," he slid into a booth. "You did it. You actually made Adrian Voss go soft. Made him walk away from everything." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Do you have any idea what that did to the balance of power in the city?" "That wasn't my intention." "Of course it wasn't. You're just a sweet girl who saved an old lady, right?" His voice dripped with sarcasm. "But intentions don't matter. Results do. And the result is that Adrian Voss dismantled a 30-year empire in 2 weeks. Made deals that shifted millions of dollars, changed territorial lines that had been stable for decades." Myra's heart hammered. "He's out. That's what you wanted, isn't it?" "What I wanted?" Moretti laughed bitterly. "I didn't want anything. I was following orders. And now my boss, Castellano, he's got what he wanted. More territory, more power, more money." He leaned forward. "But some of us didn't get anything. Some of us watched Adrian hand over operations we'd worked years to infiltrate. Operations that were supposed to be ours. I don't understand what this has to do with me." "You're the reason he left, Mira. You and that old woman. You made him weak." Moretti's expression hardened. "And I don't like loose ends." The threat was clear now. Ice spread through Myra's veins. "Adrian made deals. He protected us. You can't." "Adrian made deals with the bosses. With people who honor agreements." Moretti stood up. "But I'm tired of taking orders. Tired of watching others get rich, while I do the dirty work." He moved toward her slowly. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to come with me, quietly. We're going to take a little drive. And we're going to see how much the great Adrian Voss really cares now that he's playing civilian. I'm not going anywhere with you. Then your brother dies." He pulled out his phone, showed her a photo. Tyler, walking out of school, backpack over one shoulder, laughing with friends. The photo had been taken today. "I've got 2 men on him right now. You make a scene, you call for help. You do anything except walk out that door with me, and Tyler's dead before you finish dialing." Myra's world narrowed to that photo. Tyler's smile. His whole life ahead of him. Everything she'd sacrificed to protect. "Why?" Her voice broke. "Why are you doing this?" "Because Adrian Voss took everything from me when he walked away. My chance at promotion, my future, my respect." Moretti's eyes were cold. "So, I'm going to take something from him. I'm going to prove he's not untouchable. And you're going to help me do it." Myra's mind raced. She could scream, but Tyler would die. She could run, but Tyler would die. She could fight, but Tyler would die. Every option led to the same nightmare. "Let me call him," she said quietly. "Let me tell Adrian you're taking me. Then he'll come and you can do whatever you're planning. But leave Tyler out of it. You think I'm stupid? The moment you call, Adrian mobilizes an army. He might be out of the game, but he still has friends. People who owe him." Moretti grabbed her arm. "No calls. No messages. We're going to disappear for a few hours, let Adrian sweat, and then we'll see how much he's willing to give up to get you back." He was pulling her toward the door when Danny emerged from the kitchen. "Mira? You okay?" "I'm fine," she said quickly, too quickly. "Just stepping out for a minute." Danny's eyes narrowed. He'd been there the first time Moretti had shown up. He recognized him. You sure about that? Tell her she's sure, Moretti said, his hand in his jacket pocket, the implied threat clear. I'm sure, Danny. It's fine. But as Moretti pushed her out the door, she met Danny's eyes and mouthed two words, call Adrian. Danny's face went pale. He understood. The black car was already waiting, engine running. Moretti shoved Mira into the back seat. Another man sat in the driver's seat, silent and intimidating. As they pulled away from the diner, Mira watched through the rear window as Danny ran back inside, phone already to his ear. She'd bought Tyler time. She'd warned Adrian. Now, she just had to survive long enough for them to find her. Where are you taking me? She asked, trying to keep the fear from her voice. Moretti smiled that cold smile. Somewhere the great Adrian Voss will never think to look. Somewhere that used to be his, but isn't anymore. He was taking her into Castellano territory. Into the one place Adrian no longer had any power. The warehouse smelled like rust and abandonment. Moretti had brought her to the old industrial district, buildings that hadn't seen legitimate business in decades. He tied her to a metal chair in what had once been an office, now just broken windows and peeling paint. Comfortable. He checked his phone, pacing. Won't be long now. Once Adrian hears his little savior is missing, he'll come running. He won't, Mira said, though she wasn't sure. He's out. You said so yourself. He's out of the business. Doesn't mean he stopped caring. Moretti crouched in front of her. That's his weakness. Always has been. He loves too deeply, too completely. His mother, his people, and now you. The girl who saved his mother's life and made him believe in redemption. So, what's your plan? Kill me? That'll just bring him back into the game. Maybe that's what I want. Moretti's eyes glittered with something unstable. Maybe I want the old Adrian back. The dangerous one. Because at least then things made sense. At least then we knew where we stood. He was unraveling, Mira realized. This wasn't about money or power. It was about a man who'd lost his purpose when Adrian walked away. Her phone buzzed in Moretti's pocket. He'd taken it when they'd arrived. He pulled it out, read the screen, and smiled. 17 missed calls. Texts from Adrian, from Roberto, from Margaret. He showed her the latest message. Tell me what you want. Please don't hurt her.
See?
He does care. Then let me go. You've made your point. Not yet. Moretti typed something, sent it. Now we wait. Adrian stood in his mother's study, phone pressed to his ear, Roberto and 4 other men surrounding him. Danny had called 30 minutes ago. 30 minutes of Mira being gone, in danger, because Adrian had thought his deals were enough. I should have killed Moretti when I had the chance, he said quietly. You didn't because you're not that man anymore, Margaret said from her chair. She looked fragile but fierce. Don't become him again, Adrian. Not even for this. Then what do I do? His voice cracked. She saved your life, Mother.
She saved me.
And now she's in danger, because I wasn't thorough enough. His phone buzzed. A message from Myra's number, but not her words. Old Castellano Warehouse. District 9. Come alone or she dies. You have 1 hour. It's a trap, Roberto said immediately. He wants you there so he can prove something. Kill you, force you back in something. I don't care. Adrian was already moving toward the door. Son, please. Margaret's voice stopped him. Think. You can't go back to that life. You can't. I'm not going back to anything. Adrian's voice was steel wrapped in exhaustion. I'm going to get her. Then I'm going to make sure Frank Moretti never threatens anyone I care about again.
How?
Roberto asked. You gave up your power. You have no soldiers, no territory in that district. Castellano controls it now. Adrian smiled grimly. Then I'll ask nicely. 20 minutes later, Adrian walked through the doors of Castellano's social club, neutral ground, where business was discussed and violence was forbidden. Every head turned. Conversation stopped. The man who'd walked away from his empire had returned. Vincent Castellano himself emerged from the back room, a man in his 60s with silver hair and eyes like a shark. Adrian Voss. I didn't expect to see you here again. I need a favor. The room erupted in laughter. Adrian stood still, letting it wash over him. Castellano raised a hand for silence. You need a favor. From me. After you gave away half of what I wanted, destroyed the balance of power, and retired like some kind of saint, his smile was dangerous. Why would I help you? Because Frank Moretti has kidnapped Mirachin. He's holding her in one of your warehouses in District 9. Adrian's voice didn't waver. And because we both know that wasn't authorized. Moretti's acting alone, probably planning to destabilize things even further. That's bad for both of us. Castellano's expression shifted. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Or you will in about 30 seconds when your people tell you. Adrian pulled out his phone, showed him the message. He's using your territory, your resources, without permission. That's a problem for you, Vincent. Makes you look weak. Like you can't control your own men. The room had gone silent again. Everyone understood what was happening. Adrian was playing the game one last time, but playing it smart. Not with violence, but with logic. Castellano's jaw tightened. He pulled out his own phone, made a call. Listened. His face darkened. Moretti, he said into the phone, is currently unauthorized in Warehouse 7 with a civilian hostage. He looked at Adrian. No one told me. Then we have a common problem, Adrian said quietly. I'm asking you to solve it. Why would I? Because I'm offering you something in return. Adrian pulled an envelope from his jacket. Deeds to 3 properties I kept. Prime real estate in the financial district, worth about $15 million. Yours, free and clear, if you get Mirachin out safely and make sure Frank Moretti never threatens anyone again. Castellano took the envelope, examined the documents. His eyebrows rose. You'd give me this? For a waitress? For family, Adrian corrected. Yes. The older man studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. You really are out, aren't it? You really walked away. I did. And you're not coming back. Never. Castellano made another call. Warehouse 7. Send everyone. Bring Moretti to me. And don't let the girl get hurt. He hung up, looked at Adrian. She'll be safe in 20 minutes. Thank you. Don't thank me. This is business, but Castellano's expression held something like respect. Though I'll say this, you surprised me, Voss. Most men in your position would have come in shooting. You came in negotiating. Maybe you really have changed. Adrian just nodded and walked out, pulling out his phone to call his mother. Mira was back at the diner 2 days later. Her wrists still bore faint marks from the ropes, hidden under long sleeves. Moretti was gone. No one said where, and Mira didn't ask. She'd been rescued by Castellano's men, driven home in silence, and found Tyler waiting with Margaret and Adrian. Tyler had held her for 20 minutes straight, sobbing into her shoulder. Margaret had made tea, with shaking hands. And Adrian had stood by the window, his back to them all, shoulders rigid with guilt. Now, as she refilled coffee cups and took orders, everything felt surreal. Like she'd lived through someone else's nightmare and woken up back in her own life. Table 9 needs ketchup, Paula called out, pulling Mira from her thoughts. Life moved forward. It always did. Sunday dinner at Margaret's had become sacred. Mira and Tyler arrived at 5 as always. But today felt different. Adrian met them at the door, and for the first time, Mira saw something unexpected in his expression, nervousness. Before we eat, he said, I need to show you both something. He led them not to the dining room, but to his study. On the desk lay a folder, official-looking and thick with documents. What is this? Mira asked. Tyler's college fund. The anonymous trust. Adrian's voice was quiet. It's not enough. Not for what you deserve, what you've been through. So I've added to it. Tyler opened the folder, his eyes widening. This is enough for 4 years at any school. With living expenses.
Books.
Everything. It's paid for, Adrian confirmed. All of it. No loans, no debt. You choose where you want to go, and you go. I can't accept, Mira started. You can, Margaret appeared in the doorway. Because it's not about owing or being bought. It's about giving someone who deserves a chance the ability to take it. She moved to Tyler, cupped his face. Your sister gave up her dreams to raise you. Let us give those dreams back. Tyler looked at Mira, tears in his eyes. Is this okay? She thought about her parents, about their restaurant, about working herself to exhaustion, about pride and independence and the weight of doing everything alone. Then she looked at Margaret's hopeful face, at Adrian's careful distance, at Tyler's desperate hope. Yes, she whispered. It's okay. Tyler launched himself at Adrian in a hug that clearly surprised them both. Adrian stood frozen for a moment, then slowly wrapped his arms around the boy, his eyes closing. Thank you, Tyler said. Thank you for everything. Dinner was chaotic and perfect. Adrian's lasagna had finally turned out edible, mostly because Margaret had supervised every step. They ate and laughed and told stories. Tyler talked about MIT and Stanford, his top choices. Margaret shared gossip about her garden club. Mira felt the tension she'd carried for months finally begin to ease. After dinner, while Tyler and Margaret played chess in the conservatory, Adrian found Mira in the garden. The late spring air was cool, flowers blooming in colors that seemed too bright to be real. I'm sorry, he said without preamble. For everything. For the danger, for Moretti, for dragging you into my world. You didn't drag me anywhere, Mira turned to face him. I made a choice to help your mother. Everything that came after. That's not on you. It feels like it is. Then let it go, she smiled softly. You gave up everything to keep us safe. You negotiated instead of fighting. You chose differently, she paused. My father used to say that the measure of a person isn't where they start, but whether they're willing to change. You changed, Adrian. That matters. He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw the boy Margaret had described, the one who'd saved stray cats and cried over goldfish, the one who'd been buried under years of violence but never fully disappeared. I don't know how to be normal, he admitted. I don't know how to be just. A person. Someone's son. Someone's friend. None of us really know what we're doing, Mira said. We just show up and try. From inside, they heard Tyler's triumphant shout. He'd finally beaten Margaret at chess. Her delighted laughter followed, bright and young. She's happy, Adrian said softly. Happier than I've seen her in years. So are you, I think. He considered this. Maybe. It's strange. I spent 30 years building power, controlling territories, making people fear me. And now I have nothing but this house, and whatever legitimate businesses I kept. I should feel lost. But you don't. No, he smiled. A real smile, the kind that reached his eyes. I feel free. 6 months later, Tyler left for MIT. Mira helped him pack, both of them crying and laughing. Margaret had sent care packages ahead, homemade cookies, warm blankets, a framed photo of their Sunday dinners. Adrian had arranged for Tyler to have his own apartment near campus, refusing to let him live in a dorm like a peasant, which had made Tyler laugh for 10 minutes straight. The goodbye was hard, but it was also full of hope. Mira kept working at the diner, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She'd enrolled back in community college, taking nursing classes. Maybe she'd save more lives. Maybe she'd find her own path. Sunday dinners continued. Sometimes it was just Mira, Margaret, and Adrian. Sometimes Tyler video called in from Boston. Sometimes Roberto joined them, slowly becoming part of their strange, chosen family. One Sunday in December, as snow fell outside and a fire crackled in the hearth, Margaret raised her wine glass. To family, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Not the one we're born into, but the one we choose. The one we save. The one that saves us. They clinked glasses, Adrian, Mira, Tyler on the laptop screen, even Roberto from the doorway where he pretended not to be touched. To family, they echoed. And in that moment, surrounded by warmth and love and the impossible friendship that had started with CPR in a diner. Mira finally understood what her mother had meant about not owing anyone. Because this wasn't about debt. It wasn't about obligation or transaction or power. It was about showing up. About kindness creating ripples that changed everything. About a waitress who saved a life and accidentally saved a soul in the process. And about a family, strange and imperfect and absolutely real, that chose each other when it mattered most.
The end.